Hey fifth graders, today we're going to take a look at estimating sizes of products and really take a look at what happens when we multiply whole numbers by fractions, what happens to the sizes of our products, because it's really important that you understand what should happen when you multiply, let's say 20 by 3/4. Is that 20 going to get bigger? Is it going to get smaller? Is it going to be a very, very tiny portion of 20? Is it going to be most of 20? Is it going to be about half of 20? So that's our goal today, is to get some approximations of what our products are when we multiply whole numbers by fractions. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of discovery here. So let's take a look at just some examples and see if we can notice a pattern. So we've got 3 times 10 is 30. 10 times 2 is 20, 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 0 is 0. So as you can see, we are decreasing as our second number. So as this column is decreasing, our product is getting smaller. So the bigger the whole number, the larger your product will get. The smaller the whole number, the smaller the product will get. So that 10, when we multiply by 3, gets pretty big, turns into 30. That 10, when we multiply by 2, it doubles, turns into 20. And then when we multiply by 1, it remains itself. And then as we multiply by a number that's less than 1, we get smaller. That 10 turns into 0. So let's do the same thing over here with 5. Let's see if the same type of thing happens. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 0 is 0. So again, as this column decreases, as our whole numbers that we're multiplying by 5, as they get smaller, we're decreasing. And notice, as we multiply by a number that's less than 1, because 5 times 1 is itself, and then once we get smaller than that 1, our product will become smaller than 5. It will become smaller than itself. So let's take a look at a couple of fractions and see if we can estimate what two whole numbers it might fall between. So where would 4/5 fall if you were to multiply 10 by 4/5? So if I were to squeeze in the problem, 10 times 4/5, where would it fall? Would it be greater than 3? Is it between 2 and 3, 2 and 1, or 0 and 1? And the answer is 4/5 definitely lives between 0 and 1. So 10 times 4/5 would fall right in between your 0 and 1, which means your product will fall between 10 and 0, which means the 10 would become smaller. The 10 would become smaller. And in fact, I'll go ahead and solve this for us. This is actually going to be equal to 8. So as you can see, our product of 10 times 4/5 got smaller and became 8. Now, again, you boys and girls, when you were in elementary school, were used to your products getting bigger. When you thought multiplication, you thought about how your answer would get bigger than the two numbers you were multiplying. But now that we're studying fractions that live between 0 and 1, our products will get smaller than our whole numbers. Let's take a look and see if the same thing might happen with 5. So if I were to multiply 5 by 1/10, where would that fall? Well, 1/10 definitely lives between 1 and 0 and is certainly closer to 0, because 1/10 is not much at all. That's a very small fraction. And that's actually going to give us, so we know it's going to fall between 5 and 0, and this is actually going to give us 1/2, which is certainly a number that is in between 0 and 5. Okay, so in general, what happens when you multiply a fraction by a whole number? Well, your whole number gets smaller, because you are multiplying by a number that is less than 1. It is less than 1. So therefore, you will become smaller than itself. You'll become smaller than whatever that number was times 1, which is itself. So let's take a look at the sizes of fractions and see if we might be able to come up with some estimations of what our answers should be about, if we can, by estimating our fractions first. Now remember, when you're multiplying a fraction by a whole number, you are taking part of times a whole. You are taking part of a whole. You are taking part of the whole thing. Now let's examine the sizes of these fractions. 4/5, 4 out of 5 things. That's definitely going to be, it's more than half, because 2.5 out of 5 would be equal to half. It's more than half, and in fact, I'd say it's very close to 1. It's 1/5 away from a whole thing. So I would say that is closest to 1. 1/6, if you have 1 out of 6 things, you barely have much of it at all. You barely have any of it. So that's certainly close to 0. 5/5 is close to half, because 5/8 is close to half, because 4/8 would be half. So this is slightly more than half. And 4/10, half of 10 things is 5, so 5/10 would be equal to half. 4/10 is therefore a little bit less than half. So let's use this information to go ahead and estimate the sizes of our products. So let's take that 4/5. So we said that 4/5 was approximately 1, and we're going to go ahead and multiply that by 10. So what do you anticipate? Do you anticipate that, well, since 4/5 is close to 1, close to the whole thing, that you'll barely have any of it, that the product will be close to half of 10, or that the product would be most of 10? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say I think it will be most of 10, because this is very close to 1 times 10, which would give you 10. Now let's see, let's solve over here. So 4/5, this means I'm going to break it up into 5 equal groups. And the numerator tells me I'm going to take 4 of those equal groups. So here's 5 equal groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to take 4 of them. So here are 4 of those groups, and that is equal to 8. So what is 8 in comparison to 10? 8 is definitely most of 10. If you had $10 and I took 8 of it, you'd say, hey, you took most of my money. So our approximation was spot on. 1/6 of 12. 1/6 times 12. 1/6 of 12. 1/6 of 12. So since 1/6 is really, really close to 0, I'm anticipating that this product will be approximately 12 times 0, which should be close to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I think this is going to be close to none of 12. It will be a very small portion of 12. It'll be something, because 1/6 is equal to something. It's a little bit, a small portion, but it's not much at all. It won't be close to half. If my fraction was closer to half, then we would have half of 12. Let's solve and see what 1/6 of 12 is. This means I'm going to break it up into 6 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm taking one of these groups, and that's equal to 2. So if I compare 2 to 12, if I have 2 out of 12, I don't have much of it at all. I practically have none of it. If you had $12 and I took 2 of it, of course you wouldn't be very happy with me. But it's not like I took most of your money. I didn't even take close, I barely took any of it at all. 5/8. Okay, so since 5/8 is close to half, and in fact, since it's bigger than half, I anticipate that our product will be close to half of 16, which is going to be 8. Now the question is it going to be more than half of 16 or less? Well, we already said that 5/8 was greater than half. So I'm going to go ahead and say I think it'll be more than half. So I anticipate my answer will be more than half of 16, which is 8. So let's see what we end up getting. Here I'm going to break this up into 8 groups. And then we'll take 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups. And we're going to take 5 of these guys. And this is equal to 10. 10 is indeed greater than half of 16, which was equal to 8. So 10 is definitely bigger than 8, but pretty close to it, just as we thought it would be. We said, hey, we think it'll be close to half, and we think it'll be slightly more than half, which we were correct. And then 4/10 of 20. So since 4/10 is close to half, I'm going to go ahead and say I do think this will be close to half of 20, because it's almost 1/2 times 20. And I think it'll be a little bit less than half, because 4/10 is less than 5/10, which is equal to half. So let's see what we end up getting. So 4/10 of 20, I'm going to need to break it up into 10 groups. So when I break up 20 into 10 groups, I get 2 in each group. So let's go ahead and draw a picture of that. Nine, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So I've got 10 groups of 2. Okay, 10 groups of 2 gives me 20, and I need to take 4 of them. This gives me 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so what was half? Well, half would have been 10. Half, if I cut it in half, boom, I would have had 10. 8 is slightly less than that. It's slightly less than 10 as we had anticipated. So this is a very valuable skill when you're just trying to estimate approximately how much you're going to be dealing with. And this will be my last example, if I'm your business partner and I say, hey, I'm going to take 3/5 of the profits, we make $100. Well, 3/5 is more than half. Half would be 2.5 out of 5. So I'm taking slightly more than half of the proceeds of our profits. So I'm going to take slightly more than half of the profits, which would be 50 in this case. If we made $100, 50 would be half. If I'm taking a little bit more than that, it's looking like I'm taking, maybe $60. And actually it turns out 3/5 of $100 is $60. So it gives you a nice quick approximation of what your answer should look like.